Good day everyone, welcome back to my lesson. Today, we will discuss one of the elusive topics in anthropology, which is culture.
Today, we will discuss the word culture, or culture as a central concept of anthropology and sociology. Most of the conversations, humans have always used the word culture. Most of the times, we define culture as traditions, our belief systems, human behavior or values, and art. And let us see if the following words are really related from the word culture. Culture as a concept. According to E.B. Taylor, culture is a complex whole which includes knowledge, beliefs, morals, or any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. While, according to Cambridge English Dictionary, that culture is the way of life, especially the general customs and beliefs of a particular group of people at a particular time. This is a culture wheel. And this culture wheel gives justice to the definition of E.B. Taylor that culture is anything that made by humans. And culture is an umbrella term of our stories, languages, our rituals, our art, values, and other things which can help us to have a greater community. Culture is designed for living. It will help us to understand the relationship of humans towards to our society. Just like the previous lessons between the relationship of anthropology and sociology. So we use the word or the term cultural practices, which means that culture help us to navigate on the different institutions or parts of our society. Culture have different characteristics, and the following characteristics will help us to deepen our understanding about culture. First characteristic is culture is everything. Another, culture is learned. Culture is adaptive and it can be maladaptive. Culture affects biology. And lastly, culture changes. So let us discuss the following. Let us discuss first, culture is everything. We can say that culture is everything. It is because culture pertains to what a person has, does, and thinks. And it can be classified into two. First is material culture. So when we say material culture, it refers to all tangible and visible parts of culture. For example, a culinary culture in East Asia. That most of the people in East Asia commonly use chopstick to eat or to eat their food. Another example is Lucky Charms, particularly in Chinese culture. But as time passes by, some countries are believing also in this kind of culture. For example, here in the Philippines, when you go in the different eatery, restaurant, or lugawan, tapsihan, you can see a different or several examples of Lucky Charms because Filipinos believe that these Lucky Charms can attract good fortune or blessings as well. Another example is imagery or different symbols on our religious beliefs. For example, in a Toltec beliefs or culture, they have a lot of totem poles that they believe that it can help them to express their ceremonies and rituals to their god or gods. And another example of material culture is different dresses, clothes, or costumes, particularly if we have different events in our society, like festivals or weddings. Culture can be also classified as non-material or intangible parts of culture. It refers to our values, beliefs, or behavior. For example, superstition, that most of the people believe that 13 is unlucky number. Or Friday the 13th is a misfortune day. And did you know that most of the buildings, they don't have a 13th floor? Another non-material culture is our rituals and ceremonies. A good example is praying, or how will you express your faith to your God. And another example of non-material culture is our value system, wherein in the Philippines, we use tumano. Or another values is using po at opo. Another characteristic of culture is learned. Always remember that culture is not inborn, it is learned. Culture is often called learned ways of behavior. And we have different processes of learning culture. First is enculturation. When we say enculturation, this is the most common process on learning culture. For example, is socialization between your family, your neighbors, and your friends. Or learning Filipino values like mano po, or the use of po at opo. Another process is acculturation. So when we say acculturation, these are culture that can be modified to accommodate desirable traits from other culture. Or this is a process of learning the other culture of the other countries or other places. For example, is the inclination of some Filipinos in different elements of Korean culture. Or K-pop, that Filipinos learn different languages, dances, or music, or movies as well, which become a part of their culture. Another example is the influence of samgyeopsal here in the Philippines, wherein originated in East Asia. And the third process of learning culture is deculturation. So when we say deculturation, this is the process of being forgotten, or this is a process wherein the older generation has a conflict to the younger generation. It is because of their needs and realities. So the tendency is we learn other or new culture in our society, but there is also a culture that has been lost in our society. For example, is the inventions of many technologies like cell phones or laptops, computers, which tend to forget the different basic technologies like typewriter and Walkman as well. Another example is the larong Filipino or larong kalye here in the Philippines. Some of them has been lost in our society because of the influence of gadgets. Another characteristic is culture is adaptive. When we say culture is adaptive, our culture can be serve as a tool for survival. For example, on the different natural disaster. In the northern part of our country, particularly in Batanes or the Ivatan people, most of their construction of their houses are made of concrete materials to adapt to their environment because their environment are prone to typhoons. And another example is food taboos. Did you know that food taboos on the different religious beliefs are served as a tool for their survival or to have a long life? For example, is Islam or Muslim people. They are prohibited on eating pork or food with a blood. It is because of practicality, wherein that we all know that pork can cause a different diseases. For example, is high blood or heart diseases, or it can be also cancer. And this belief is not totally part of their culture, but this is a part of their ways of living. And another example of food taboos, that there are group of people which is prohibited on drinking alcoholic drinks or liquors because of the effect also of that beverages. Another characteristic of culture is maladaptive. If culture can be adaptive or tool for survival, there is also a culture that can cause problems. That is why culture is maladaptive. Or this is also known as toxic culture. A good example of culture is maladaptive is traffic, or in a social term, this is also known as car culture. Car culture because one of the factors that can cause traffic is cars, or a lot of cars in our society. There are a lot of cars in an urban area because some of the people in an urban area use cars as symbol of their social status. Another example of toxic culture here in the Philippines is vote buying. Most of the time during election or during the campaign of the different politicians. And many Filipino people keeps on subscribing on this toxic culture because of poverty. And the tendency of this kind of culture or toxic culture is here in the Philippines, we keep on electing incompetent and corrupt politicians. Another example of culture is maladaptive is Filipino time. And most of us keep on doing this toxic culture. For example, most of the students have their group activities or their groupings. And if they have a meeting at exactly 8 a.m., we will not follow the given time because of believing in Filipino time, which Filipino time can cause a lot of problems like wasting our time, It can cause less productivity and conflicts to the other people. So let us go now with the other characteristic of culture. And that is culture affects biology. When we say culture affects biology, humans are born into cultures that have values on beauty and body. As such, they alter their bodies to fit into their physiological norms that are dictated by their culture. And we have several culture that can affect our biological attributes, and let us understand the following reasons. First is piercing culture. Piercing culture, or the reasons of piercing culture, are varied. It can be based on our social status or a beauty standards. It can be also a self-expression. In Huarani tribe in the Amazon, they have a piercing culture because of beauty standards and social status. So if you have a lot of pierce or piercing, meaning you have a high social status in your tribes and a symbol of beautification. Another is a warrior from Papua New Guinea tribe, which shows or symbolizes bravery to their tribes. Another culture that can affect our biological attributes is lip plating, or they can also called as lip disc, particularly in Mursi tribe in Ethiopia in Africa. They do lip disc or lip plating because of beauty standards. And this culture is desired for men. Another example of culture affects biology that we can see here in this picture is scarification. If you can notice, her arm and to her breast, there is a scar which can show also a beauty standard or beautification. Another example of culture affects biology in Mentawai tribe, particularly in Indonesia, they do tooth sharpening or teeth sharpening. The reason why they do teeth sharpening, it is because it symbolizes bravery. And this is also a passage to their adolescence. Another example of culture affects biology is tattooing or tattoo. Particularly here in the Philippines, during the pre-Hispanic period, we have the culture of tattoo. For example, this picture or these two Igorot men with chaklag. So when we say chaklag, tattoo chest, which shows a warrior to their tribe or a bravery as a warrior to their tribe. Another example of tattooing in the Philippines is Mambabatok, located in Kalinga. And the last and the oldest Mambabatok here in the Philippines is known as Wangod. And they do Mambabatok to their tribe because they believe it can improve their body figures or their beauty. The most common example of culture affects biology is the culture of foot binding, particularly in Chinese culture. This is also known as lotus feet. And the reasons of foot binding or lotus feet in Chinese culture has several reasons. One of the reasons is good marriage. That most of the leaders or emperors in China believing that women who did foot binding can attract good marriage or good fortune in life. Another reason is a beauty standard. They believe that if you have a small feet or not more than 3 inches feet, you are qualified to their beauty standard. And another reason is this is a symbol of social status of women in a Chinese culture, wherein the tendency is that if you have this culture in your body, you will become a passive in your society. That is why most of the family culture in Asia, women are expectedly do the household chores, and man expectedly do the social works or the outside works of society. But now, we do not practice this type of culture because most of medical experts believe that foot binding or lotus feet has a negative effect to our society. So, does culture unite or divide a society? The answer is culture unite our society. Because culture help us to understand other groups of people. But it doesn't mean that we need to have a one culture in our society. Our society has a main culture and subcultures. And those subcultures can cause clashes. And that clashes are one of the ways of culture changes in our society. So we must focus on our main culture, not on the subculture. And our main culture is unity and acceptance. That we need to accept and we must understand that we have a diverse culture in our society, and that is okay. And there is no superior and least culture in our society. Again, though we have a diverse culture, but we are all equal. But in a reality, we cannot remove division in our society. But as well as you understand and accept the differences or the diverse culture of different group of people, it will less conflicts to us or in our society. And according to Robert Allen, an author, that cultural differences should not separate us from each other, but rather, cultural diversity brings a collective strength that can benefit all of humanity. Again, culture is designed for living, not designed for destruction. And always remember that culture can be our tool to have a peaceful society. So always use our culture as a strength that can benefit all of humanity.